Welcome to the CeCe Side Tie Dress Sew Along. Today I will be sewing view B. To follow along with this tutorial, please make sure you have all your pattern pieces cut out and ready to go. If you have a fabric that requires stay stitching, please go ahead and do this now. Otherwise, we will begin by marking our drill points and snipping notches. I like to use the pattern piece to mark my drill points using a water erasable pen. I will poke through the pattern piece and mark it on the fabric. And also here I indicate snipping my notches. And let's begin. The first step is to make the side ties. I like to use a bias tape maker. I just find it faster and easier. Press the folds to the center. And then press the whole thing in half. We're going to prepare one finished edge on each tie, so I will clip the corners and fold down the end 1 centimeter, and then fold the whole thing in half and pin to secure. We're going to sew 3 sides of the tie, 2 long and 1 short. I start at the short end, and with a piece of paper underneath, it just helps so that the fabric doesn't go into the feed dogs. So sew along, pivot, sew down the long edge, and pivot and sew up the other side. Repeat with all 4 ties and we will set those aside. With the right sides facing, we're going to take pattern piece A, the front panels, and pin those together along the middle seam. The front panel has the middle split, so here I'm putting an extra pin to remind me to change my stitch length. Take it over to the sewing machine and we are going to sew at 5/8 inch or a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Once I get to the split, I am going to change my stitch length to the longest. This is going to help when we use the seam ripper in the end to open up the split. Once we have it sewn down, we are going to press open our seam. When we reach the neckline, we're going to fold it over 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 inch to match the front seam. And now repeat all these steps on the 2 back panels. Next step, we are going to connect the back panel and the front panels via the shoulder seam. Now, important to note here is that we open up the folded and pressed seam on the neck so that we are sewing straight across the shoulder seam. Once stitched, we can take it over to press, and now we're going to open and fold under these seams for a clean finish. The fold here is about 0.5 centimeters. Edge stitch down the seam allowance. on both sides and on both shoulders. And now we'll have one long panel which is connected by the shoulder seams, and we're going to turn under and press and pin the seam allowance from the bottom of the front panel all the way up to the neckline, over the shoulders, and all the way down the back panel. To sew down our seam allowance here, we're going to start at one end of the hem, and we are going to edge stitch all the way up to the neck point, over the shoulders, and all the way down the back panel to the hem. You're going to turn and you're going to sew all the way up the other side, back panel, shoulders, neckline, all the way down the front panel. With your front and back panel seams enclosed, now is a good time to reinforce the V-neck here by sewing a little triangle. Now it's time to add ties. Find your notches on your front panel and pin them into place. Quick note on the side ties here, they are movable. If you would like to change the position to more of your natural waist, or higher or lower, feel free to do that at this stage. With the right sides facing, we are going to attach the middle panels. Note here that the underarm curve, the higher point on the curve, indicates the front. So starting at the underarm, I am going to pin all the way down to the hem. When I reach the side tie, I will remove the pin and then pin it between the front panel and the middle panel. Sew this seam with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, or 5/8 inch, and repeat on both sides. Next, we will press open the seam allowance. Once pressed, we will trim the seam allowance on the middle panel side to 0.5 centimeters or 1/4 of an inch. Here we are creating a flat felled seam finish. Once you have trimmed away the inside seam allowance, fold on under the remaining seam allowance, press and pin all the way along. Repeat on the other side. Once pinned and pressed, take it to the sewing machine and edge stitch all the way down, just being mindful here that this is a curve, so follow that curve as you sew. With middle panels now connected to the front panels, move on to connecting the back panels to the middle panel by attaching the ties to the back panel, then attaching the middle panel to the back panel at the side seams, and creating your flat felled seams at the back, and you will be left with a fully enclosed garment. Now that the dress is fully enclosed, we will move on to the armscye. Create your bias binding as you wish. Here I'm using a bias tape maker. Alternatively, you can just fold in the edges, fold it in half to create your tape. We're going to be attaching the bias tape to the right side. So with the right sides of the bias tape, I like to start at the underarm and pin all the way around. For the technique of joining the bias binding, I do have an extra tutorial in the instructions showing exactly the technique I use to do that. But what we're going to do here is stop with a 2 to 3 inch gap and take it over to the sewing machine and sew it all the way around. Pin the bias tape ends together and we're going to stitch them at a 45-degree angle. Trim off the excess binding. And sew down the remaining bias tape to the armscye. With the bias binding attached, press towards the armhole and fold the bias tape twice, enclosing the raw edges, and pin on the inside. This is creating a concealed bias binding. Edge stitch to secure in place and repeat on the other armhole. Time to hem your dress. We're going to fold and press 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter towards the wrong side. First, press and do this all the way around. Next, we will fold and press the hem again another 2.3 inches or 6 centimeters towards the wrong side, pin and press all the way around. If you are sewing the mini version of the dress, then you can go ahead and just sew the hem all the way around and you are done. To sew the long view, we will edge stitch along the hem, and as you approach the front seam where the split will be, with the needle down, pivot and sew down towards the bottom of the hem. Turn the dress and start on the adjacent side of the split. Stitch up and with needle down, pivot and continue along the hem until you are back to where you started. Sew a stitch across the middle seam where the slit ends to secure. Using a seam ripper, open up the slit and you are finished. I hope you enjoyed sewing the CeCe Side Tie Dress. I would love to see your creations. Please tag me at fiber.forms.studio or use the hashtag CeCe Side Tie Dress. All the pattern details will be found in the description, and thanks for watching.